Hi, everyone. Today we are going to talk about responsible AI, and I think we can already start. The topic is comprehensive, and I think every minute is precious. Thank you very much to everyone who joined this webinar. The objective of our webinar is to delve into the topic from a broader perspective. The challenges we face, be they ethical, regulatory, technical, transcenders borders. Our journey with artificial intelligence is not just a technical evolution, it is profound societal transformation that probably demands collective responsibility, ethical stewardship, and from my perspective, at least global dialogue where nations come together to share insights, standards, and best practices. This would probably fortify our collective journey into the AI future. I'm therefore very happy and honored to have the opportunity to welcome speakers from different parts of the world and discuss the topics from a different perspective. I would also like to thank again all of you for your interest and participation in the webinar, and I encourage you to join the conversation anytime. As next, let me introduce you with the speakers. I will start with Mari. Mari is a certified privacy professional in Europe and in the US. She served as a policy researcher at the Center for AI and Digital Policy, where she contributed to AI and Democratic Values, a first comprehensive survey of national AI policies. Currently, she's an LL.M candidate at Fordham University School of Law with a focus on IT and IP law. She is joining us today from the US, New York. I will move to Javier. He is joining us today from Mexico as a founder and CTO of Easy. Hi, Javier. Easy is an innovative app bridging WhatsApp with OpenAI's GPT technology. With a background in artificial intelligence, he now also serves as a coach and consultant on AI topics for individuals and companies, mostly in the USA. Javier has over 15 years of experience as a tech entrepreneur. Coming back to Europe, I'm very happy to have an expert in AI, data, and policy as a speaker today. Alexandre has extensive experience working in business law and digital policy, including roles such as special advisor on digital development at the Council of Europe and senior manager of technology, media, and telecoms at Deloitte Legal. He's a certified information privacy professional in Europe and also certified in the foundations of independent audit of AI systems. And currently, Alexander is acting as a private consultant, helping navigate and implement digital policy, responsible AI, and data governance. I'm very happy to have a representative of ELTA board as a speaker. I would like to welcome you, John. And John is, as I already mentioned, a board member of ELTA and co-founder of the Law Tech Consultancy. John has extensive experience in helping law firms and in-house teams in finding extensive experience in helping law firms as well as in-house teams find the right legal tech and works closely with some of the most innovative solutions from startups to unicorns. The webinar will be moderated by me. I'm a lawyer and also certified data protection professional in Europe and an ELTA ambassador in Georgia. And maybe at this very moment, I have to define that I'm ambassador of country Georgia and not from the US Georgia. Well, I think we are now ready to engage in the discussion about AI, right? We have probably all encountered the terms artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning many times. Nevertheless, Javier, Can you please explain what the terms artificial intelligence and machine learning mean, and what these terms mean in practice for companies today? The floor
Yeah,
is.
thank you very much. So I think it's important for us to start by understanding how old is AI. We think it's something like it just came up last year, or because these tools that exist today, that this is a topic that is being more, popular these days. But the reality is that we can go back to 1950, when the early thoughts from Alan Turing started asking all the right questions. And the right question is really simple: can machines think? Right? Back in 1950, we started making those, I like to call them baby steps, when we started walking towards that. Now, before we move forward, we need to understand also what was before AI. What it means, right? Artificial intelligence. It means like we're coming from human intelligence. We're trying to synthesize. We're creating a synthetic intelligence that is basically simulating at this best capacity what human intelligence is. We cannot build and invent something that we don't first know, right? So what we're trying to build with AI, what we built with AI was this kind of brain, right? Think of AI as a brain. Now the brain has neurons, it has a huge network, but it doesn't do anything if it's not trained, right? It works very well, very fast. But if you don't train your brain, then it's pretty much like a huge machine without any combustion engine or something, right? So machine learning is kind of like an algorithm, not an algorithm, but I like to use that word. It's more of a learning technique, right? So it's like teaching that brain through examples, teaching that brain through data, pre-processed data. Now everybody thinks data is just private data, right? Privacy data, images from your Instagram, because that's what we understand. That's what we know. That's all the data we see. But there's also synthetic data being created in labs just to be fed into these machine learning algorithms. Um, I hope I explained the difference between those two. AI is basically like a brain, and machine learning is part of AI, but it's also built to teach the brain how to react into stuff. Now, each of us have a brain. All of our brains are different because they were trained different. They were built in a different country. They were taught a different language, right? So every single one of us think differently, and all of us can make mistakes too. So just like how we can make mistakes, even though our training was different, so can machines, because machines were built kind of to replicate us. Now, just to answer really briefly your last part of the question, how can we apply this to a company or organizations? I don't want to just focus on companies, because I think that's wrong. This is a technology that is not just used for business. This is a technology that must be used for everything that we are doing. And when I say that, I mean we have the capability to think faster, make faster decisions, analyze data. Like something that would take me 5 years to read worth of books can be read within 5 seconds or less with any of the technologies that we have. So that's what it means for technologies, nations, groups, communities. I don't know, even baseball fans. Everything's about to change because we're going to be able to think faster and make faster decisions.
Thank you very much. So as its core, AI relies on data and algorithms to make decisions and perform tasks, right? Just we learn from our experiences. AI systems learn from the data they are exposed to. So Javier, can you explain briefly what the stages in AI process are and how data collection and data process happen in the AI lifecycle?
Of course, of course. I like to start first with an analogy. I don't know why my mind works a lot like that. I want to compare the AI life cycle to, I don't know, let's say like baking a cake. The cake likes life cycle, if we can call it. So let's first get started with the cake. What do you do when you're trying to build a cake? It's gonna feel obvious, but the first thing you need to understand is you got to choose what type of cake you want to build, right? Because not all cakes are the same. So you got to choose your cake. You got to choose your expectations. What do you want to get out of this? You got to gather the ingredients. You got to, put everything together. But then you also have to make sure the ingredients are in a good quality. They're not rotten. They're not, dirty. Otherwise, your whole cake is gonna be messed up. You got to clean the ingredients. You got to follow a recipe, right? And after everything's done, after you have to, let the process go through, you come up with a product, you come up with something, but you cannot just put it out there. You need to taste it. You need to train. Not train. You need to sample what you built. You need to sample any system that you created. Once it's ready, then you can deploy. You can serve to everybody. In AI, it's the same. First, you got to define your problem. You got to understand what you're trying to build, because not all cakes will serve the same, right? Result. Then you got to worry about data collection. Where are you going to get all this data from? Because you got to train it at some point, right? Before we train it, we need to pre-process that data. We need to, make sure the data is correctly. There's not a lot of noise. There's just enough noise for it to be strong. After that, you need to, select your model, which is like your recipe. There's different recipes with the same ingredients. So you gotta choose your model right. And then you gotta train your model with the data that you collected. After that, then it's all about tasting and sampling and delivering. It's all about evaluating your model and deploying your model out to the, I want to say live production, but that's not how it works, right? You first go small set, test it out, see if it works, and then you go out to the public. I would say that would be a good analogy to understand the AI life cycle.
Thank you very much, Javier, for your insight. I think understanding the underlying technology is crucial to figuring out how we can use these systems in a way that is responsible and ethical. John, as I mentioned earlier, AI and machine learning have been around for a long time, but now it's becoming a real thing. So why and where do you see it going?
Yeah, everybody, it's a pleasure to be speaking on a panel full of great people. Super interesting. Look, I think that we're beginning to understand how we can use technology for good. Obviously, I think this is something that we're talking very much at the moment about the EU Act, and that's trying to deal with the parts of where it goes wrong. But what we really need to look at is how can we use things to make tasks easier. Certainly bringing it back to a law firm analogy and bringing it back to law firms in general, there are lots of people that are still staying in their law firm doing work till 3-4 o'clock in the morning, which is causing burnout of repetitive tasks that actually with machine learning can become somewhat easier. So there definitely is a move forward of, right, what part of the job that we're doing as a law firm, which parts of it are really horrible and really difficult and are backbreaking in terms of their repetitiveness. And that's where machine learning comes in. It says, look, if I'm going to be doing the same thing over and over again, I should be able to train. And we're talking constantly about training and adopting. But the idea of AI is let's try and get some of those tasks that we're using to make our lives easier. And that's what we should always be looking at with anything that we're looking on the legal tech side. And AI is it making my life easier? Is it saving time, which essentially means it's saving effort, which of course in the law firm analogy means you're saving money because time is money. And there's no other brutal way of putting it. We're obviously trying to move away from billable hours in law firms and move to more project-based. Whichever way you put it, though, you're still looking at how can I make lives easier, which means saving time and effort. So I think that what we're seeing at the moment is a lot of legal tech coming up that's trying to do exactly that process. So it's on a wave, it's on a march now, whether that's through AI on your own documents or whether it's using Gen AI to see what's out there, that's a totally different way of looking at things. So, and I'm sure we're going to come on to that later.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, John. I totally agree with you. So let me move on to Mari. Mari, can you provide an explanation of responsible AI to help us better understand the concept before diving into further discussions?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Nino. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm really happy that we are going to talk about this very hot and interesting topic. So what is responsible AI? It's important to know that responsible AI is not something that is like universally defined. Rather, it encompasses principles that have been developed by different AI governance frameworks in recent years. So to give you a prominent and very important examples are first UNESCO recommendation on AI ethics that has 193 countries signing this framework. Then we have OECD AI principles that first was introduced in 2019, and they are going to be an update this year. And last but not least, European Commission's ethics recommendation for trustworthy AI. Those are just a few examples of many non-binding frameworks that talks about the responsible AI. But good news is that they have commonalities. So they have common themes that is centered around the common and core principles, such as transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, and human oversight.
Thank you very much for this overview. So I think it would be legitimate to say, if we put aside specific regulations, that the ethical compass guiding AI development should be or could be calibrated to prioritize the principles you just mentioned. So like transparency, privacy, fairness, and accountability. And I would suggest you move our discussion to discussing these principles first before jumping to the specific regulations. So Mari, what is fairness and transparency in the context of responsible AI? I mean, these principles.
Yeah, sure. So, well, transparency is one of the complex core principles that has various characteristics. It basically has two main goals. The first to ensure it ensures to disclose the process behind the development and design of AI systems. So now many companies are having the so-called AI system cards that disclose disclose the information about the development and designing of AI system. For example, OpenAI has AI system cards for ChatGPT that shares information about its limitation, risks associated with the use of ChatGPT, purpose, and other information. So we can compare it to also have an analogy about that. So we can compare it to nutrition label. I know that's not the best analogy, but where you have the list of ingredients and you know how the food have been developed. So it's good to know as a user to make an informed decision whether you want to buy Coca-Cola, even if you know that there is tons of sugar there. No judgment here, but it's good for an analogy. So here it also will be the same. So even if you know that in system card, ChatGPT has problem with hallucination, it's up to you whether you should decide whether you want to use the ChatGPT or not. So it's very good to know how the AI system has been designed and developed. So that is the first one. The second is, and also very important, is that the aim of transparency is to give you an explanation why an AI system generated certain output. So this is where the term explainable AI comes into play. For example, in an organization that extends credit, such as banks that have the algorithmic decision whether to give you credit or not. So the transparent AI system should be able to explain why the credit has been denied. And finally, the user should be aware that they are interacting with AI system. For example, whether you interacting with chatbots or the human being. This is all about the transparency. And moving on to fairness principle that covers a very complex issues such as bias and discrimination. The premise is simple, that AI systems should be unbiased and fair, and every person should be treated equitably. But it is easier said than done. For example, FTC, the Federal Trade Commission that is in the US, explained that unfair AI system can be, quote unquote, if it causes more harm than good. But I should know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to fairness, and it's heavily depend on the context of its application. To give you an example, imagine the hiring algorithm that has been only trained on the historic data, and history suggests that it can be biased. So the algorithm just learn from the data, it inherits and perpetuate its bias into the algorithm. So this is one of the example of having unfair algorithm and having the unfair decisions. So to mitigate that risk, this is one of the practice that have companies can deploy, is that have a human oversight on this kind of algorithm that can be biased and discriminatory.
Thank you very much, Mari. Alexandre, I am going to have the same question to you. Could you please share your thoughts on the principles of transparency and fairness in the context of responsible AI?
Sure. So the transparency and fairness principles are enshrined in the documents my other colleagues have already mentioned. I would also mention that both terms have been also used in the context of the American risk management framework, which was recently released by NIST, right? And in that or other formulation, so we see anyway the fairness and transparency discussed all around all those documents, either by NIST or OECD or the EU AI Act, for example. They may not necessarily be worded in the same manner, but the idea is the same. And for me, if you ask me, like the transparency element is really a practical one, first and foremost, and we can talk about different types rather of transparency. So if you are going to, let's say, think about operationalizing the act, thinking about how companies could comply with it, we would really then see that there are different types of transparency. There is some transparency towards end users or those people who are subjected to the operated AI systems first. And on the other hand, there is some transparency towards deployers of the AI systems from the developers, and especially the model developers, as we now see in the context of React. There is a special concern with regard to some, not all, but some general purpose so-called AI models. And there we have different types of obligations which support the idea of transparency. So in terms of deployer to in terms of developer to deployer transparency, it's largely about disclosing necessary information about the system's parameters, how it works, the deployer manual of some kind, which indicates how better to integrate the system into the existing environment which is operated by a particular deployer. So we are then talking about disclosing the necessary limitations and level of accuracy, for example, of a systems, so that each particular deployer is able to say that, yeah, this system is exactly what I need, or not really. This is not what I'm looking for, because according to the information transparently shared by the developer, it may not fit my use case, or it may fit it very well, right? On the level of end user, customer, consumer transparency, and population more broadly, we can say that certainly we are concerned with, I would say, human dignity when humans interact with AI systems. This is a particular case covered by the EU Act, for example, when we see that in cases the systems interact with humans, and it is not obvious to a reasonable person that he or she is interacting with an AI system, like if somebody is calling him and asking him for some details and so on, right? In this case, in this scenario, despite any other context, and the Act, for example, says that you have to disclose the fact that it is the AI system which is calling the person and not human being, right? Because it really plays on a lot of levels, including like the general idea with human dignity, for you to be able to understand whether you're interacting with another agent, like with a person who has agency, or a tool of some corporation, all right, which may be possessing, for example, some capabilities which are not usually associated with humans, like a memory which can last for ages, right? So you need to be sure that, for example, if you know that you are interacting with the AI system, you should be very concerned about what you are actually disclosing, because the person may forget. AI systems, unless programmed to do so, they will never forget what you have provided. And moreover, they have an immense capability which humans do not possess, in terms of combining in the information, the personal, notably personal information on people from different sources, to profile them and to provide really some really persuasive arguments if needed, like while interfacing with a person, that may convince him or her to do as the company which operates the AI system pleases, right? So there is this really concern with the disparity of power, and of course there has to be some transparency in this situation, or in situations like that. And we can talk about other different scenarios, like disclosing the obviously disclosing the deepfake, which are not obvious to people, and you may not know that an image or a video has been generated, but provided as something which resembles a truthful depiction of events which never occurred. Obviously, this is a problem which is, for example, addressed in the European AI Act, right? As to fairness, from my perspective, although we can discuss it from different levels, and the colleague has already mentioned the obvious issue with harmful bias, which is a concern well taken into account by all the drafters of all those instruments which we have mentioned before, the issues of non-discrimination and so on. This is an obvious issue which is included usually in the notion of fairness, right? Like making sure that AI systems, when taking decisions, automated decisions, or supporting the automated decision-making process, they are initially developed on the basis of data sets which have been verified to contain to minimum level of bias, and measures have been taken in that regard to to ensure a more fair representations of whatever is we are talking about, because if an AI system is about to be deployed in a particular context, in a particular geography, and so on, of course, we need to make sure that the data which the system is being trained on, first and foremost, is well aligned with the context of its future use. Because if you are going to, let's say, try and train an AI system on some data concerning like people who are premature, let's say, of a particular ethnic origin and so on, obviously that system may not necessarily be the best one to address maybe the similar issues and decisions which are taken, but in another country with a completely different mix of ethnicities, and as a result, the information, the data which will be fed into the system during the operation will be completely different from the one which the system has been trained on, resulting in erroneous decisions and potentially inflicting a lot of harm. And as our colleague has said previously, like, the issue with the benefit of AI is that it really facilitates like taking decisions much quicker, for example, right? But this means on the con side that a lot of people, like much more people, can be harmed in the same amount of time, right? Using an automated process as opposed to a manual process, right? So we need to take into account the scaling of harm, which is perpetuated by improperly calibrated systems or systems which have not been trained on the data which is appropriate for the particular use case. And when we're talking about fairness, I think it's also important to mention that there is a certain concern with, what I would say, procedural fairness. So when a certain process has been taken over by an automated system, we need to make sure that this does not diminish the quality of outcomes which have been maybe at a lower scale been delivered previously through a manual process or through an automated process which was not using a particular AI system, but a certain previous generation of automation devices and measures. So we just need to make sure in the sense that when we're considering a particular use case and process, that there is procedural fairness, that the person which is affected as a result of using that system, right? Especially on a grand scale, lots of people are affected. That we need to make sure that they are treated fairly as a result of this process being automated, and they have a recourse. They have a possibility to appeal the decision and possibly to reverse the decision. And certainly sometimes we might be facing a situation where just because of the fact that the decision might have irreversible consequences, then we just may have to decide not to use a particular system and maybe use a less sophisticated process, less sophisticated system or a manual process, just because we foresee that the situation might be like the outcomes might be so harmful and then irreversible that it's not worth it in terms of the human rights which may be impaired as a result. So this is my perspective on transparency and fairness.
Thank you very much for very interesting insights. I would like to go back to Javier and Alexander as well as Mari have mentioned that AI model should not be biased. So could you please, so what might be the technical challenges of AI model being non-biased? Could you please very briefly explain it to us?
Okay, I'll try my best because this is a huge topic. I don't have the last. I mean, I don't know if what I'm about to say is like the holy grail or not. But I think the biggest hurdle, the most important bottleneck that we're struggling with right now is effective training needs a lot of GPUs. So as long as we don't fix that processing issue or even manufacturing those chips, then it's gonna stay on, like, let's say the richest companies in the world will be able to develop this, and then nobody else will have access to even dream of creating a competitor or anything like that, because things are being way much more expensive than a gram of gold or anything. Like all these metals are becoming the most rarest, like, I don't know if that's the word, sorry, like the rarest product in the world now are becoming GPUs or transistors, billions of them. And just last week, the biggest company, I don't want to say brands, but the biggest company in the world almost today in terms of market cap has just announced a new pair of technology that took us over 10 billion to process. They had to take $10 billion to process this new tech. And now they're selling each one of those chips in about 30 to 40K. And those chips are, well, are not out in the market yet, but once they are, not everybody will be able to afford it. It's like you have to sell your house to buy one of those, right? It's in a lot of countries, maybe not all the countries cost 30K, 40K, but in like South America, you can definitely see there will be a huge, huge issue. So as long as we're not able to go around that bottleneck of GPU production, chip manufacturing, then we cannot train effective, we cannot process the amount of data we need to be able to not, we cannot remove bias. Every one of us is biased. We cannot be unbiased. That's part of the reality. So what we try to do is mitigate bias. How do we mitigate bias? By adding education, by adding layers, by running the same process, billions of teraflops again. Like, we have to make sure we cannot appreciate it, but these machines are like, they're being trained on, imagine it's going to take 2,000 years to train them, and it's taking 2 weeks. But that's the amount of data they are ingesting. We would never be able to do that in a lifetime. So I think that's the biggest technical issue, GPU.
Thank you very much, Javier. I still would like to talk about 2 more principles, but I would like to ask you to just give us like brief answer to this question, as I want us also to discuss like regulations and to discuss the topic from the regulatory perspective. So the question is to Alexander and Mari. Mari has earlier mentioned that responsible AI includes consideration of privacy and accountability. Alexander, could you please expand on these aspects?
Sure. For me, the accountability aspect usually covers what has to be done on usually an organizational level. We're talking implementing AI in an organizational context to ensure responsibility and accountability are assigned and controlled. So this means if you are in a company which develops AI, right, you need to understand what is the structure, what is the governance structure that had been put in place, and what are the policies which have been put in place, and accordingly the procedures and processes what have been implemented in this regard to ensure that we're not just on the remaining on the level of principles that yeah, we would like to play fair the game of AI, right? This is not sufficient, obviously. We need to make sure that, yeah, there are particular policies stating like the objectives of a particular organization and how these objectives are going to be implemented in practice, and who are personally responsible. And this is an important aspect which is often overlooked, that there have to be persons whose careers will be necessarily on the line for failing, especially in the hard way, in a negligent, grossly negligent way, to make sure that, for example, the data sets have been mitigated for bias, right? And for example, that the systems are deployed in the like, if we are talking about the deployer, yeah, there has to be people who know what they're doing, why they are deploying the system in a particular manner for the particular use case, and what were the corporate policies and procedures they have applied and complied with, and where is the evidence. For me, the first and foremost, the most important thing is evidence, because otherwise it makes no sense to speak about trustworthy AI, responsible AI, if there are no people directly and personally responsible with their career for any particular aspect of implementing these or that, risk management framework and so on within each particular organization which is either developing or deploying AI. So this has to be done. So this was the accountability, and the second one was on privacy, right? So just to be clear.
Yeah.
So in terms of privacy, obviously that this is an overarching, requirement for AI systems which are involved and employed in the context which involves people in this or that regard, that their privacy interests are considered. And this means making sure that the data protection regulations are observed and complied with both during the development stage, when the systems are collecting, or when the data is being collected to be used then to be included in training data sets, and then during the deployment, of course, of system, if it's interacting with people or using someone's data, as an output, as an input, in the process of coming up with some inferences about particular people, then the laws which are on the books in the particular jurisdictions, right, depending on where the systems are being deployed and used, need to be complied with, which protect the rights of citizens in particular manner. And of course, speaking of the EU context, we have general data protection regulation, which applies to, in the commercial context, and we have sister regulation, which applies to European Union bodies, in the same way and according to the same principles. And that means that, as I said, during the development and deployment phases, throughout basically the whole actually life cycle of an AI system, the regulations which are already in place, the laws and regulations on privacy, on data protection, are being complied with.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Mari, would you like to briefly contribute to this question as well?
Yeah, it will be hard to contribute because Alexander perfectly explained those principles, but I will just summarize that accountable principle aims to make sure that individuals, organizations, that AI systems will be held accountable for the consequences that comes from the development, deployment, and the use of AI systems. And as Alexander already mentioned, evidence. So organizations should demonstrate that they have processes within an organization to have responsible AI practices. And what about the privacies? One of the critical aspects of accountability is to make sure that you protect privacy throughout the AI lifecycle. As we talked and everyone knows that AI system needs large amount of data, a plethora of amount of data to train the model. And most of the data are personal data. So by prioritizing privacy protection, organization can build trust with users and stakeholders and mitigate the risks that is associated with unauthorized, for example, unauthorized access and misuse of personal data.
Thank you very much. John, before we look at this topic from a regulatory perspective, it's intriguing to understand the current adoption of new legal tech solutions by law firms. Are they considering the ethical implication of these solutions? Are they raising questions about the EU AI Act and data privacy? And also, new technologies are continuously emerging, right? So are they considering the ethical aspects? What trends do you observe in terms of how these emerging solutions address ethical concerns?
Yeah, it's really interesting because you bring that up, and actually we're not seeing so much of that, how ethical is the approach. The biggest sort of, I suppose, barrier that we're seeing over here and with the law firms that I work with in the States, which is, a lot of the AmLaw 200, is more about data privacy and what's happening to my data. What is happening to my data? So as we've mentioned over the last 48 minutes over and over again, any model needs data to train it, to understand it. That data has to go somewhere to then come back, or has to be processed by something. And that is the biggest barrier to entry right now, in terms of, I don't think it's looking at it in an ethical way that we would normally think is ethical. What we're looking at here is actually the responsibility of the law firm who's dealing with data that is incredibly sensitive, and therefore, where is that data going? What is the machine then doing? The machine learning, the AI, that is then making the process that you're suggesting that much easier. So a lot of that is, and where people are very keen to see what's happening. So I work with 10 different legal tech solutions at the moment, and all 10 have some form of AI attributable to what they're doing. They're all working in different parts of the law firm. Some are working with litigation, some are working with tax, others are working with the law firm in general. And what we're seeing is that everybody wants to see what's out there. Everybody wants to take a demo. Everybody wants to see what can make it easier. The adoption, though, is falling a little bit slower. I mean, law firms are slow to make decisions anyway, in general, especially when it comes to new tech. They have committees, they have innovation teams. Innovation teams then have budget concerns, they have X, Y, and Z. But what we're not seeing is, oh my God, I love that Gen AI tool, I'm going to implement that next week. Actually, it's, I want to see it, I want to understand how it's going to work. And we work very closely with the team, and it's been well documented, so I can talk about it publicly. We work very closely with the team at Adelshaw Goddard, who could see that this was going to be a real point of difference for their law firm. They are a large law firm, to just over 2,000 fee earners, and they wanted to make sure that they had a Gen AI strategy going forward in 2024. So we tested a number of different solutions. I worked closely with the team at Spellbook, for example, who were part of that test. And at the end, they tried it with different parts of the law firm. So where were the use cases? How could it work? And obviously, there are lots of different use cases. Everybody works in a very different way within each facet of the law firm. But through testing and understanding, and then certainly doing all of the right security about where data was going and where it's coming back to, stress testing that over and over again, then you can start to understand how it's going to work. Now, it's great that Adelshaw Goddard has 2,500 people, has this amazing innovation team. when you go one stage down from that, you come into a very different person, which is a different law firm, and how that they are going to be able to understand where data is going, what's happening, becomes much harder than Adelshaw Goddard. So, yeah, I've seen a massive increase of people saying, yeah, I want to see it. I want to have a look. Oh, show me. I need to see a demo of that. I want to understand. Actual adoption, it's falling a little bit behind, but I know that will pick up very quickly. There's no doubt about it.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. There is a lot of food for thought. We still have time to discuss existing regulations. As AI becomes more widespread, organizations must follow data privacy laws, including the new AI regulations, to have responsible AI practices and be compliant with existing regulations. Mari, would it be possible to briefly tell us how organizations can be compliant with data privacy in the AI context in Europe and in the USA?
Yes, thank you for the question, because it's very crucial to understand that organizations that develop, deploy, and use AI system, privacy regulation already applies to them, and there is no carve-out, no exception to AI. So as said, to train the model, you need the plethora of data, and most of them are personal data. So privacy laws applies to collection and processing of personal data, and essentially organizations need to understand privacy laws in every jurisdiction they do business. So to start with the US, I will just briefly summarize it, because I want Alexander to talk about the AI Act, because it's more like a hot topic. And to start with the US, so the task of being compliant with privacy laws is very difficult in the US. You have no comprehensive federal privacy laws. Instead, you have sector-specific regulation for certain types of data, such as health data, financial data, telecommunications data, and few more. However, the protection is limited in scope, and there is no central enforcement agency responsible for compliance. And to address these deficiencies, a Federal Trade Commission, the US agency, has broad authority to deceptive and unfair acts of business practices that also covers data privacy practices and data security practices. And unfortunately, FTCs, even if it's actively engaged in those practices, it's not enough. And most in the US, most data privacy regulations remain at the state level. And the patchwork of state privacy laws is exacerbating the task of being compliant with privacy laws in the US, because there is no uniformity in enforcement and no uniformity in legislation. So as of today, there is 13 state comprehensive privacy laws, and California is leading its in here, the state privacy laws. And besides having this sector-specific laws, federal laws, and state laws, in the US, foreign jurisdiction privacy laws also apply, like GDPR and Canadian privacy laws. So as you can see, the task in the US being compliant with privacy laws is pretty hard. And now, as we have EU AI Act that Alexander will cover, it will exacerbate the problem of this task, and it will become more and more difficult for the US companies.
Thank you very much. So, Alexander, so the floor is yours regarding EU AI Act that was fully adopted last week. And could you please talk about a little bit about the EU AI Act? I know the time, we are running out of the time, but still it's interesting, who does the AI regulation apply? Could you also provide some insights into what practices are categorized as high risk according to the EU AI Act? And maybe we could also briefly talk about it, how, what about the interplay between AI Act and the GDPR?
So to touch upon the interplay immediately, I would say that the AI Act itself is not dealing with personal data as such, in particular, as just say for certain provisions in recitals, just to clarify the context, and certain provisions in Article 10, which deals with data governance more generally, and there is a provision which deals with how can you possibly use special categories like sensitive personal data in some aspects, and this is regulated. But other than that, the EU Act just specifies in its general provisions on the scope that the GDPR and the other regulations which are dealing with data privacy and data protection, which have been already enacted in the European Union so far, they just remain fully applicable to the whole context. So it has no business of directly governing the data protection in particular, because there are already necessary regulations on the European Union level, and we need to make sure that they are complied with throughout the whole life cycle of the AI system in the EU. And speaking of the high-risk systems which you've mentioned, so obviously there are different kinds of such systems which the idea is generally is like there are some use cases, particular use cases where there is a really elevated level of risk to persons or to critical infrastructure of the particular jurisdiction and so on. And in those cases, most the bulk of the obligations which the EU Act provides are triggered, right? So because there are some obviously obligations which apply to other systems as well, but speaking of high risk, these are primarily the issues, the use cases which are considered in annexes 2 and 3. In this case, there are some existing evidently high risk sectors like healthcare on the one hand, and on the other hand, there is like Annex 3, which is speaking about, as I said, the critical infrastructure, for example, or the use of AI in some really serious applications, like speaking of using AI at work or during the educational process, where the systems are being used to assess people, and then with really potentially life changing outcomes for those people, like where the people are going to be fired as a result of an assessment or excluded from the further educational process. Such use cases, so not necessarily all of them, but such really high risk use cases are then governed, and of course these are not limited to just employment and education and critical infrastructure. There are some others like public services, essential services, where really a lot of things are at stake for really sectors of the population which are really affected the most generally. So, and the law enforcement use, of course, and the migration and asylum matters, and there are some others like applications like justice, democratic processes, and so on. Yeah, but I will not necessarily be fully exhaustive. It's just that by these examples, you would easily see that all those use cases concern really some decision making, which is being automated, and as the outcomes are used in the real world, it affects the real world circumstances, and the lives and of the people are potentially at risk. And this means that because of that, special obligations are triggered and then enforced.
Thank you very much, Alexander. As we conclude, what are your, the question goes to everyone, what are your final thoughts or wishes regarding future developments in the field of AI and its impact on society? So what would be your message, like in one sentence? We can start from John.
Yeah, come on. I embrace the change is what all I can say. Don't be scared. Embrace the change. Try stuff out. Make sure that it's safe, obviously, but try stuff out and embrace it rather than trying to find the holes.
Thank you very much. Great message. Mari?
Yeah, I also hope that AI systems benefit society and we can mitigate the harm. And as John mentioned, we should try the new things. And I agree with John.
Thank you very much. Alexander, I will move to you. So.
Yeah, my recommendation would be, if you are thinking about or you are being suggested to use an AI system for a certain use case in a certain process, let's say, the first thing to do is actually not to just immediately embrace this idea and take it through, but first make two steps just first of all consider whether the process which you are considering to use the AI for makes sense, because maybe you just really need to eliminate the process altogether before instead of automating a useless process or damaging or harmful process. You just need to eliminate it, right? This is the first thing to consider. Then, if you can still consider that the process makes sense, and you should consider optimizing it in a certain way, which is whenever possible, right? And then when the question comes that it might benefit from automation, then you will have to consider all types of automation in existence and which might make sense for this particular use case, including certain AI systems and solutions. And within those cases, when it makes more sense economically and for other reasons to use specifically AI systems and certain specific ones, then it makes sense to make an assessment on how it will affect stakeholders, and notably outside your organizations, outside of the organization which employs the system, because it's often the case that there are externalities which are not considered. So the company, the organization benefits from the use of certain AI systems, but there are a lot of negative consequences for the rest of the society or particular groups. So you need to consider that and make this assessment standard part of your assessment scenario.
Thank you very much. Great and very useful advice. And Javier?
I think it's like a mix of what everyone said. I think we're we just discovered fire. A lot of things are gonna change. And I don't think we need to see fire as something we have to regulate individually. Like, oh, this guy's built this rule, this guy's built this rule, so you just move your company to an island and there you go, you're all set. No, we need to realize this is a life-changing moment, and we need to first educate ourselves. There's a lot of people who don't understand anything about what's happening. We need to make ourselves understand, because this is going to affect every single one of us. And then from that perspective, from a point where we did not invent AI, okay? We cannot patent AI. Nobody knows if it was a discovery or an invention. There's a huge difference between those two, right? Just as we did not invent fire. So if we did not invent it, how can we, not think about losing our borders? I think there's a lot of political issues I don't want to talk about, but there's a lot of things we need to do before we get to regulate this. We need to step ahead. We need to unite. We need to find a way to work together. Otherwise, it's just gonna be us against each other. I don't fear of AI. I fear people who might do things, right? So we need to act accordingly. We could do anything, yet we choose software. No, we need to find a way forward. So, sorry, I think a new global structure must be in place, and I think AI is the catalyst for this.
Thank you very much. In conclusion, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the speakers and attendees for your participation, and to all speakers for valuable contributions throughout this webinar. I'm very happy to have the possibility to discuss this topic with you, and I wish you a great evening, and Mari and Javier a great day ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.